We're live here on the Decision Point crossover. Week continues to roll along, and it is my honor to be stepping in for the Podfather alongside Anand and Nanduri. Anand, 2 days in a row, I get to talk to you. It's a pretty good week for me.
What's going on, Jack? How are you, man?
Fantastic, fantastic. Excited about the best division in all of the NFL, the AFC North. We've got some awesome stories there. And we've also got some conversations about the running backs coming up. The whole market there has been set on fire. We're waiting for Dalvin Cook to sign during this podcast. It's going to be a good show. It's going to be by the end of the weekend, which means by the end of Friday.
Yeah, the NFL doesn't really have weekends anymore. It's basically just a 24/7 news cycle. So, whenever his agent decides to tweet something out about the Dolphins showing interest again, that's when the Jets will probably make their move. And, I think he will be a Jet. We talked about that yesterday.
It'll be the 4:00 news dump as always. No 4:00 news dump from the Steelers expected, though they've got a lot going on. They're back at training camp. They are invested heavily in Kenny Pickett. What do you think about this Steelers team?
I think much to Matt's chagrin, I don't think they're dead in the water or, kind of going to be a doormat in this division by any means. That defense is still really, really good. Mike Tomlin has made lemonade out of various fruits that aren't even lemons. I mean, the man is unbelievable. And I know he hates the whole coach speak thing, but look, if somebody shows you consistently over and over again that they can make it work with, not the greatest parts, you've got to believe them at some point. And the Steelers are, if nothing else, if Kenny Pickett takes a little bit of a step this year, that offense is going to be pretty good. I mean, the pieces are there. We know what you've got in Najee Harris. You may not love him, but again, super volume, reliable running back. And then you've got an offensive line that's improved. You've got George Pickens as your number one. You've got Freiermuth there. Obviously, they sent Claypool out to Chicago and got Joey Porter Jr. for him, basically, which is
what an upgrade.
Yeah. Oh my God. And you've got a lot of these guys. Deontay Johnson's another really good player that they've got over there. Yes, ideally, you want someone that is a Jamar Chase, that's a Justin Jefferson, a Cooper Kupp, a Tyreek Hill to be your one. But one of the best ways to go about not having a true number 1A is to have 2 1Bs. And in Pickens and Johnson, I think they do have that. They're going to be a really fun team just to go through and watch this year. If nothing else, because Kenny Pickett is really the only thing that matters this year.
Yep.
Yes. Everything else is kind of ancillary. They need to find out if he's the long-term answer and the guy there. And there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the way that he played at the end of last year. Yeah, we know that's one of the toughest transitions there is in sports, is playing quarterback at, the Power 5 level to the NFL. And Kenny obviously was in college a lot longer than several guys. Part of that was COVID related. He had his breakout year at the very end of his college career. They got to see him in Pittsburgh, train in the same facilities that the Steelers do. And
put on a whole farce that they're going to draft Malik Willis too, just to throw everyone off the scent.
Yep. And then they took the hometown kid. And there's reason for optimism in Pittsburgh, because even if he's not the guy, they have the ability to go draft someone else in 24, 25, 26 if they want to. This year is really about progression. I don't really think it's as much about wins and losses and trying to really make a playoff push, just because of the rest of this division is so strong and the rest of this conference is so strong. But one of the things that I love about the way that they've gone about this is they're not sitting there throwing the expectations out there. We are a Super Bowl team. Like it feels like the Jets and the Broncos have heaped these expectations on themselves that Pittsburgh just hasn't. And I think it's super beneficial for a quarterback like Kenny that has not the strongest arm in the world, but is super mobile, much more mobile than you would assume just looking at him. I think the biggest part of the season for Pittsburgh is going to be kind of down the stretch. Once we kind of see what these moving pieces that they have look like and their quarterback looks like, that last 6-7 weeks of the season, you're going to get a real snapshot of what they will be moving forward. And if they can make a playoff push, that's awesome. if health tears this team apart and they get a high draft pick, that's not the end of the world, because this is not a Super Bowl team this year anyway, realistically speaking, unless Kenny makes some massive jump, which again is well within the realm of possibility. I don't think it's super likely, but sometimes it just requires a little bit of a tweak here or there. We saw it with Daniel Jones last year. I think it's a good time to be a Steelers fan, if only because, my God, man, starting Mason Rudolph was rough. Watching the end of Ben Roethlisberger was rough. Like, they've had to watch some really, really, really tough quarterbacking out there. And if nothing else, Kenny Pickett is a significant upgrade over that.
It was so tough at quarterback for a period that Duck Hodges actually had a fandom out there, and he was terrible. I don't even know if he's in the NFL still. I don't think he is.
Duck Hodges was Taylor Heineke before Taylor Heineke, but Taylor Heineke was balling. Taylor Heineke was balling. And there are guys like that get cult followings that are just fun. Like, if you're not going to be good, be fun. There's nothing worse than being bad and boring. Nobody wants to watch that. Like, I want to see, like, the worst teams in the league do some wild shit, man. I want triple reverse passes in Arizona. Run 2 QB sets, do whatever you got to do. Have some fun out there for us, please, because you cannot be bad and unwatchable.
And that was the beauty of those Tampa Bay Buccaneers teams with Ryan Fitzpatrick. They were so bad, but they were just slinging it all over the place. Absolutely love that. And I really do love Kenny Pickett. I am a big believer in him. The two most important stats, the two things that give us the biggest indication: deep ball catchable pass rate, number 1 in the NFL. Pressured catchable pass rate, number 1 in the NFL. So he is accurate deep. He doesn't have the cannon arm, but he has that touch. He can feather it in, and he's accurate under pressure. He's just accurate in general. The number 2 quarterback in catchable pass rate across the NFL. But he did put the ball in harm's way a lot. He was number 2 in danger plays with 40, number 2 in interceptable passes with 40, and he didn't start all season. So that is a massive red flag. But if you believe, like I do, that young quarterbacks can improve, can make better decisions, then Kenny Pickett should be fine.
I think he's a prime candidate. We talk a lot about that year 2 to year 3 jump. I think he's probably a much more primed candidate for that. But you'll start to see the flashes, right? I mean, you got to see them at the end of his rookie year with Trevor Lawrence. You started to see him the end of last year with Justin Fields. Some guys, it's a year 1 to year 2 thing. Some guys, it's a year 2 to year 3 thing. Very, very rarely it can be a year 3 to year 4 thing, or, in some cases, even a year 4 to year 5 thing. But surrounding someone with the pieces that can make them successful is going to give them a significantly better chance of actually doing the things that we think Kenny Pickett's capable of doing. And they've surrounded him with pieces. No, nobody's accusing them of having, the Bengals receiving core by any means. But the pieces are there to have a really functional offense that does some really good things. And I think Kenny's mobility is going to give them something, if they lean into it a little bit more, that they haven't had at that position in a long, long time. And so it's going to be interesting to just watch them figure out how they want to build this offense around him and highlight the stuff that he can do, because everybody's going to want to talk about the stuff that Kenny Pickett cannot do, right? Your job is to maximize what he can do. And I think Omar Khan, in his time as Steelers GM, has done a really, really good job of bringing in talent in spots that matter. And this team is going to be better than people think. And they're going to surprise a couple people. There are going to be really good teams that lose games to Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh was the better team that day. Do I think they can do that for 17 games and make the playoffs in a loaded AFC? Probably not. But they're going to put the fear of God in some of these really good teams that you don't think that they can hang with.
And that's just what they always do. They're always that annoying team. Even when they're good, they're annoying because they let the bad teams compete with them. And when they're bad, they compete with the good teams. My one worry that I have with the Steelers offense, though, is there is absolutely zero speed across the board. None. Out of the starting offensive members, because Calvin Austin, he's going to be the 4th receiver. He's the one guy that has speed. After that, it's George Pickens with the 4.47. Deontay Johnson, 4.5. Allen Robinson probably runs a 4.7, 4.8 at this point in his career. Pat Freiermuth runs a 4.7, 4.8. So this is a slow offense, but with Kenny Pickett's skill set, where he is just accurate, and when he does take those chances deep, he's on point, they can get around it. But that's my one worry with this offense, is that they don't have someone to take the top off outside of Calvin Austin, who isn't a 3-down player.
I think the interesting part is every receiver kind of wins in their own way. And you used to watch it a lot, actually. People used to, early in Devontae Adams' career, the guy that he reminded me most of was Stevie Johnson.
Ooh.
Because for whatever reason, they just got open. Like, you watch them basically play basketball at the line of scrimmage, get off press, leave corners flat-footed, and take 3-yard slants into 12 yards, and then in their career it turns into 18 yards and then house calls. So, I mean, if Deontay and GP and Allen Robinson can do what their skill sets suggest they can do, they can still separate and win on those 50-50 balls and box people out and keep this offense on time and on schedule. It's not going to look like Kansas City's offense. It's not going to look like Miami's offense, but that doesn't mean it can't be effective, because we watched New England do this forever. They weren't the fastest guys. They just beat you with precision timing, running the ball, and out scheming you. And it is possible to do. And I think Tomlin's a good enough coach to know what to lean into. I think they're going to scare really good teams over and over again this season. I just don't think they're quite ready yet to win a lot of those games that really good teams should win. And not to draw the full parallel, because they're not this team, but the 2021 Lions had a lot of winnable games that they lost simply because their quarterback or their roster was just too young to know how to win those games yet. I think there's going to be a lot of that in Pittsburgh this year, but mainly falling on the shoulders of Kenny Pickett and the quarterback room, as opposed to, with the Lions, it was basically everybody's just young. The defense is going to carry them through the games that they should win, but the offense will show up in games against good teams. And I'm excited to kind of watch them match up, because, as they say, styles make fights. It's going to be really interesting to watch them match up with, a Jacksonville that is going to throw the ball all over the yard and try to score 40 on you. So how they play that game is going to be fun.
And I think that's a game where they will against the Steelers, because, yeah, Patrick Peterson, he's had a great career, but he is a little bit taking a step back. Levi Wallace, one of the slower corners in the NFL. So a team like the Jaguars that are just pure speed, balling, guns a-blazing, those are the teams the Steelers will struggle with on defense, and those are the teams that will make Kenny Pickett pass more, take over the game. And this is why I both love and hate the 8.5 over/under for their win total. And it's so perfect, because it's the narrative. Oh, Tomlin doesn't lose. Tomlin doesn't have losing seasons. Mike Tomlin can't have a losing season. So you're either riding with that and giving them 9 wins just because they're the Steelers, or you're like me, and I think I'm going to take the under. I don't think it's much under, but I think this is a 7 to 9 win team. 7 and 8 are lower than 8.5. I'm going to take the under here, but it's still a good team.
I think there's a world where injuries ravage a little bit of this division. They find a way to win 10, but it is somewhere in that 7 to 10 range. For me, this is your classic stay away, much like the Texans. That number is enticing you to go under. And I know everyone out there is going to sit there and be like, oh, they're in a division with the Ravens and the Browns and the Bengals. We'll just take the under here. There's no way they get to 9 wins. Watch what happens in early December when they've won a couple games that they shouldn't have won, and they're a lot closer to getting to that number than you originally would have thought. It's just the way that they work, man. It's any given Sunday is true, and we try to talk about college football here because it does matter projecting to the next level. But I'm sorry, there's a 0% chance that Jacksonville State is beating Alabama any given weekend. It does not matter. You could ask them to play hungover on a Tuesday. It's still not. It literally will not matter. And there's that much of a talent disparity between the two. But in the NFL, you get wacky results all the times, like the Colts beating the Chiefs last year. Who saw that one coming? That is among the wins that the Indianapolis Colts had last year that led to them getting the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft was a win over the team that won the Super Bowl. The game is just wacky sometimes, and that's why this 8.5 number is a complete stay away from me. They could be at 7, they could be at 8, they could be at 9, they could be at 10. The bottom could fall out and everything could go terribly, and they could be a 5-win team. Everybody could get hurt and they make some magical run. This is, to me, we have no information on what this team is yet because we don't know what the quarterback is yet. I would avoid that. I feel no way, any way about that number of 8.5.
Yeah, and I'm avoiding the AFC Championship. I'm avoiding the Super Bowl for the Steelers. I'm not interested at all. They just can't hang with these upper end teams, so there's no point going into it. The one that did jump out to me, though, is Kenny Pickett. He is number 18 in MVP odds. He's behind Brock Purdy, which was interesting enough, and ahead of Kirk Cousins.
Guys, what are we doing here? Guys, what are we doing here? There is no reason that Kenny Pickett should have MVP odds above Kirk Cousins.
Nope.
Come on, guys. What are we doing here? Yeah, I get it. It's a big brand, and people are going to bet it because it's the quarterback of the Steelers. I 100% understand. In Western PA, trust me, I know. Grew up in Ohio. I know in Western PA, they're going to take a lot of money on Kenny Pickett winning MVP, but to have his odds ahead of Kirk Cousins is just nuts. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get why anyone would actually take that. But, again, really good team, very well coached, questions at a very major position. He's just young. And, I don't think their roster is as good as everybody else in this division, but it's not as far away as you would think. The defense is better than most other defenses, with similar win totals in that area. This could be a team that just suffocates teams to death like Denver did last year. And if they get close, and if they get the corner play to be able to do that, this team's going to be a tough out. This is not a rollover and die kind of franchise. They've never been built that way, and I don't think they ever will be built that way as long as Tomlin's their head coach.
And this might be the best division in all of football. For the Super Bowl odds, the Steelers are 18th, which means they are just at the precipice of being a top half of the league. The rest is the Browns, the Ravens, the Bengals. The one other narrative. So this is a narrative award, MVP. There's no narrative that Kenny Pickett can create to win this. It'll be about Tomlin. It'll be about the defense. Kenny Pickett can't do it. Kirk Cousins can. But another player I don't believe can get the narrative to be MVP is Deshaun Watson. The NFL
there's no way.
Will not give it to him. And I don't understand how he can be 12th in MVP odds. That is ridiculous. There is a 0% chance in his entire NFL career Deshaun Watson will ever win an MVP.
Jack, I want you to look up something for me because you can actually bet on this. There are odds for Deshaun Watson to win Comeback Player of the Year.
Why? The NFL
coming back from what?
Yeah.
Coming back from what? Okay, Comeback Player of the Year, again, narrative award. DeMar Hamlin's going to win it if he takes one snap. That is I don't even think it's really a question. I think it's going to be given to him no matter what. The only player that I think has a outside shot, potentially, if he plays one single snap, is if John Mechie comes back and has basically an all-pro season at wide receiver.
That could happen.
That's the only one that I see that could potentially actually do that. So, given all of that, betting on Deshaun Watson to win MVP is crazy because they're not going to give it to him even if he wins it on the field. They're absolutely not going to give Deshaun Watson MVP.
Now, the PR behind it would be so bad.
It's a narrative-based award. Again, I talked about this yesterday. I think we should call it Player of the Year because that's how we issue it. It's not the most valuable player. One thing that's interesting to me about Cleveland that nobody really has been talking about is Watson really didn't get time last year because of all of the off-field stuff that was happening and the way that suspension was issued. They didn't get live bullets basically until the end of the season. Deshaun Watson was kind of learning on the fly. We know what this team can be on paper. You're talking about a quarterback that 3-4 years ago was considered the third best quarterback in the league. At least, at worst, top 5. You're talking about probably the best pure runner in the league in Chubb. An offensive line of road graders. They just maul people. That's awesome to watch. And then your receivers are Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Not lacking for talent. We've seen flashes of what Njoku can be. And the defense has probably the best pure pass rusher in the league in Myles Garrett. I think he should have won Defensive Player of the Year last year. That's how strongly I feel about how good he was. There's a lot to like about this team. The thing that you don't like is the uncertainty. How much are they going to lean into Deshaun Watson? How much of his former self can he be? How long will it take him, if he can get back to that, to get there? Because this division is so tough that you can't get behind the 8 ball early and have a prayer. Because I promise you, Baltimore's just going to run over people. You've seen what Lamar's been as a runner. That's been well documented. They finally gave him weapons. So now the big problem for Cleveland is the division they're in. If they're in the AFC South, I think you'd be locking them in as a playoff team.
Oh, yeah.
But you're talking about the Steelers, again, nightmares of years and years and years of the Steelers beating up on the Browns. You've got the Ravens, who've historically beat up on the Browns. The Browns inexplicably have had the Bengals number just because that's how divisional football works. None of this shit makes sense half the time. But the strangest part about trying to figure out what the Browns are is trying to slot them in among the AFC, not among their own division. Because you basically have the trio at the top of Kansas City, Cincinnati, Buffalo that have established themselves over time as these three teams are likely to win their division. These three teams are likely to at least get to, the divisional round, if not the conference championship game, if not the Super Bowl. Everybody else is fighting for that 4 slot. And it's going to be the Jacksonvilles of the world. We think the Chargers have a shot to do that. We think the Browns and the Ravens have shots to do that. But there's just such a log jam after those three that it's going to become can the Browns beat all of those teams around them that are going to fight for that number 4 slot? Even if we're not talking about the actual, playoff seeding 1 through 7. Can they beat the teams around them that are basically their competition to bust into that echelon above them? Because I really don't think that they're going to consistently beat a Kansas City, a Buffalo, a Cincinnati in playoff games. But all you really need to do is get to the dance and then put 3 together. We've seen many teams do it that we thought, it's a wild card team. Do they really have a shot to get to the Super Bowl? Yeah, they do. They do. It's just a matter of you've got to find a way in to be able to have that shot. And that's their biggest hurdle right now, is in that division, given what they have to play. Because this year, the AFC North crosses with the AFC South and the NFC West. So you've got the NFC West's got some good teams, man. You don't want to, they've got to play Jacksonville. They're going to have to play a really physical Titans team. They're going to have to play the Niners and the Seahawks, the Rams, the Cardinals. Now, we don't think the Cardinals are going to be great. The Rams offensively pose a threat. The defense is going to be yikes. But all of these teams over time, it's not like we're talking about, playing really bad teams every week. They're going to be battle tested if they get there. The question is, can they wade through all of that and get there? There's a lot to like about this roster. I think they've done a fantastic job. I think Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski have done a really solid job building a game plan around what they have. They got weirdly sideswiped in their quest to find a quarterback. This is the most unorthodox quarterback move that I think maybe any of us have ever seen, because 25, 26-year-old franchise quarterbacks are never on the market. So there's not really like a price that is usually paid. Russell Wilson's in his 30s. This is not the same at all by any means. This is not Kirk Cousins, who's a free agent. This was a trade that happened. Houston still had the rights to him. I'm interested to see if he can drag the entire offense up, because the more faith that they have in Deshaun Watson to be the guy that he was in 2019, the less they're going to have to rely on Nick Chubb and the fresher they could keep him, so that when you get into December and January in Cleveland, in Cincinnati, in Buffalo, you have a puncher's shot because he can run away from anybody. You do not want to tackle Nick Chubb 30 times in a playoff game, I promise you. And you certainly don't want to have to cover Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper for 60 minutes of a playoff game either. There's a lot to love about this Browns team. Just my only major concern is the quality of competition in their division and in their conference.
Because even if Deshaun Watson is slow out the gate, the weapons around him are good enough that they can support him. It's not ideal to lean on Nick Chubb super heavily, but they can. It's not ideal to give Amari Cooper 12 targets a game, but they can. Elijah Moore is going to command targets. It looks like he's going to be running the ball too. Donovan Peoples-Jones is there to stretch the field. He'll be replaced by Cedric Tillman down the stretch if Tillman breaks out. Otherwise, he'll replace him next year. So this is a team that is both ready now, prepared for the future, and it just all comes down to Deshaun Watson. As long as he's not a liability like he was last year, this Browns team is going to compete. It's going to scare a lot of people. 9.5. This is another one that is just the perfect line to sucker people in either way.
And they've nailed this down.
They did. They
of
killed
all
it
of
with
the
AFC
divisions,
North.
of all of the divisions that have win totals that have been put out, this is the division where I would just tell you, if you like one of these teams, bet them to make the playoffs, bet them to make the AFC Championship game, bet them to win the AFC, bet them to win the Super Bowl. Because these win total numbers are right across the board.
Yep.
And there's no angle either side in playing. The Browns number, I believe, is 9.5.
Yep. Wild.
Yeah, you could absolutely see this team winning 10 or 11 games. You could also see this
12.
You could see this team winning 7, 8, 9 games. The range of outcomes, because of the quality of competition here, is so wide, because the Browns are, frankly, an unknown quantity. Much like the Steelers, the unknown quantity is at the most important position. And if he gets back to what he was, then we have a very solid picture of what this team is. The question is, can he do it? Because we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen that Deshaun Watson in 3+ years. So to ask someone to basically take what amounts to 2.5 years off and come back firing is unlikely, to say the best. Like, you're asking a ton here. And I mean an absolute ton here. But if those pieces fit together, yeah, this is absolutely a team that has a roster that can get to a Super Bowl. No question. That's the scary part about trying to figure out the AFC. Any of these teams that are in that first tier that we just mentioned, or that second tier, all of them are capable of going on a 3-game run and beating any of the others, which makes what Kansas City and Cincinnati have done the past couple of years even more remarkable, given the talent that they have in their own divisions and in their conference. I wouldn't bet against it being KC Cincinnati again, probably at Arrowhead yet again, year 3 in a row. That's probably another 3-point game, because why would it not be?
Of course.
So that's one of the crazier things that I've seen in a long time. Every Kansas City Cincinnati game that's been Burrow Mahomes has been a 3-point game. All of them. Every single one. And when you look at the Browns, the question that you've got to figure out is, can they get to the Ravens? Can they climb the ladder and get to the Bengals? Can they climb the ladder and get to Buffalo and Kansas City? The talent's there, but nobody's questioning whether or not they're talented enough to do it. It's just, you've shown no ability to do that yet. So we're projecting if we think we can put you there, but I do believe that they have the talent at skill positions and at edge, corner, safety to go make that run.
Yeah, I think this is a good team. It's one that I'm not rooting for the Browns by any means, but plus 3,500 to win the Super Bowl, the 13th best odds in the NFL. That's pretty enticing to me. None of this other stuff stands out. There's no chance AFC Championship they win potentially, but it stands out. It's interesting. It's just, there's no certainty here. And that's what's so beautiful and so scary about this division in general.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it play out yesterday. How different does the Browns' outlook change if Cincinnati is forced to start Trey Lance or Carson Wentz instead of Joe Burrow?
Yep.
This stuff changes really, really quickly, and it's why if you're looking for an advantage in an odds market, it's rarely in win totals this late into the game. It's usually finding teams like the Browns where if one thing breaks their way, their odds would shift dramatically to be able to get in. And then again, you just need to win 3. Now, that is much easier said by me sitting here, by Jack and I sitting here talking to you over coffee this morning, than it is to actually go out and do it. I'm not suggesting that it's as easy as it sounds from us sitting here and saying it, but it is doable, and I do think they have the talent to be able to go do that. So 35-1 to win a Super Bowl for the Browns, if you run the way that you've got to look at it, if you run the NFL simulation of the season 35 times, you don't think the Browns win one of those?
I absolutely do. And if you look at the teams that they're lumped with, they're behind the Dolphins, the Jags, the Chargers, and I would put all of those teams above them.
I agree.
But then the teams behind them are the Broncos, the Steelers, and the Patriots. So I would put them ahead of them. They might be the best AFC Championship and Super Bowl odds, period.
Yeah, they need a couple things to break their way, as every Super Bowl team does.
But it's less things they need than it's really just the one.
By the way, one thing that does not get talked about nearly enough, getting the breaks that get you to a Super Bowl are often viewed as other teams' players getting injured. And that is absolutely true. No question. Niners players will take to their graves that they would have had a shot at the Eagles if they weren't starting me at quarterback in the third quarter of that game. Here's another part that doesn't get discussed enough. The health of your own team is almost more important because you have control over that. You have control over personnel decisions if everyone's healthy. If they're not, you're forced into doing some things you don't want to do, which allows other teams to take advantage of them. So as much as we talk about other teams getting injured, it's also about your team staying healthy at the right time. Or if you do miss somebody, right? Like the Dolphins are going to miss Jalen Ramsey for an extended period of time. I promise you they will be fine without him until December. But you do not want to play the Miami Dolphins in January because that team is fucking terrifying. They are so good across the board everywhere. And that's the kind of stuff that Cleveland doesn't quite have to give you the confidence to say, yeah, we love this team to be a Super Bowl participant. We think they can go into Kansas City and win. They need a break or two here or there. But again, it's more likely than 35-1. So I like that a lot more than betting they're over 9.5. Because again, if they go over 9.5, how much do you adjust that looking at the postseason? Because if they go over 9.5, if they get to 10 wins, they're probably a playoff team. And if they're a playoff team, then they're not going to be 35-1 at that point to win the Super Bowl. So if you bet them over 9.5 wins, you're probably paying a pretty decent premium over what you should for a 35-1 ticket, which I think doesn't make any sense. I would just take them to win the AFC. I don't know what that number is offhand, but that's probably, to me, the most likely scenario that holding a Browns ticket is actually offering some value.
And we don't root for any injuries, but we do know how to explain them. Before we get into the Baltimore Ravens, the Podfather has a message on injuries.
Now, as we at Player Profiler have become a full-blown machine learning company, the crowning achievement has to be the injury finder. We're now taking BMI data and injury history data and assigning a probability that a player is injured on any given touch. And not only can you see a player's fragility rating, their injury risk, we also have analysis from professional physical therapists breaking down all the major players that underwent surgery last year and what their rehabilitation looks like heading into 2023. There's a tool to compare players. There's a database where you can say, show me all the foot injuries, show me all the severe injuries, show me all the injuries requiring surgery. It provides you the key market intelligence to know what is the difference in probability that player X versus player Y will miss games this year. It's great for fantasy football, and it also just satisfies your curiosity as a fan. Go to the App Store, go to Google Play, download it. It's $5 every year just to reload the latest injury predictions and fragility ratings. The 2023 data is live now. Open your phone and get smarter.
For a team like the Baltimore Ravens, a team that has dealt with so many injuries over the years, including the last 2 years with Lamar Jackson going down at the end of the season, and it kind of hurting their team quite a bit. Ravens make the playoffs, I guess, but it doesn't matter. They weren't a playoff team with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. They just happened to be good enough early in the season, but they were so good early in the season with Greg Roman's archaic offense. I am really excited for the Todd Monken offense. And I know we don't love to praise offensive coordinators, but the shift from running 2-3 tight end sets with a fullback to 3 wide receivers, that is smaller bodies on the defense, and Lamar Jackson can handle smaller bodies pretty easily. If it's a linebacker trying to tackle Lamar Jackson, yeah, he might. If he doesn't juke him, yeah, it's going to be a big hit potentially. But with corners, those are going to be smaller hits, and Lamar can still avoid those.
The scariest part about playing Baltimore is you have nobody that can run scout team as Lamar. There is nobody that can prepare you for that suddenness, unless you are. There's one guy out there that you can go pretend is Lamar Jackson. He plays quarterback about 5 miles from here. His name is Justin Fields. Good luck with it. Unless you have him to play scout team, good luck. There's no one that can simulate that suddenness, that change of direction. People still want to hold on to their archaic pre-draft takes about Lamar Jackson. Understand that he was never given the freedom to actually throw the ball like he can. And I urge you to go back and watch the way that Bobby Petrino ran his offense at Louisville back when Lamar was, back when Lamar was in college. Lamar Jackson is not an incapable passer. He's a very good one. Is he Mahomes or Herbert or Burrow? No. But it doesn't matter because what he can do for you in the run game is so dynamic and so difference-making that he doesn't need to be Joe Burrow as a passer to be as effective as Joe Burrow is as a quarterback. The biggest thing that you've got to remember about Baltimore is this would be the 3rd year in a row, I think 2 or 3 years in a row, where in the first half of the season, before injuries decimated this team, they're the 1 seed in the AFC. Is anyone paying attention to this? Do people just forget what Lamar Jackson is as a quarterback? He is maybe outside of Pat. There's Pat, Josh Allen, and then probably Lamar. They're utterly impossible to stop if you give them what they need and go horse for horse. They're just better than you are. And Joe can throw the ball with the best of them. We think Deshaun Watson can throw the ball with the best of them. They're not doing that. Lamar Jackson could legitimately rush for 200 yards in a game.
He's done it before.
How many quarterbacks can do that? 2, maybe 3. That's it.
I'd give it 3. It's Lamar, it's Fields, and it's Hurts, but that's it. And Hurts doesn't want to.
And
there
Hurts
would never
doesn't need to.
Yeah, there would never be a situation where he wants to, needs to, unless everyone's out.
If they keep a lot of the run stuff that Greg Roman had in there, take pages from Petrino's playbook in Louisville, and then mash that with what Monken did while he was at Georgia, which allowed Stetson Bennett to have guys running free all over the place. You're going to look at this offense and realize we are only scratching the surface of what Lamar Jackson can be. What he has been is not necessarily what he will be going forward. You don't want your quarterback running the ball 12 times a game. Now, those 12 runs are going to be out of this fucking world because of the athlete that's running the ball. But you don't want him taking those hits anymore. The easiest way to do that is to build in a pass game that gives him free rushing lanes. And Greg's run game was brilliant. Everything about Greg Roman's run game was awesome. Nobody has any issue with what he did over there. It's that pass game that we so desperately wanted him to go back to the MVP version of Lamar and find that back again. But a part of it, and there is some blame to be sent to Eric DaCosta for not giving them the requisite receivers to do that with. It's been Mark Andrews and a bunch of guys. Hollywood Brown was obviously there for a little bit, but this is probably the most complete receiver room Baltimore's had in a while. The defense is going to be good. It's always good. There's, there's not a lot to write home about there. They're Baltimore. It's a John Harbaugh team. They're going to play good defense. They're going to play special teams very well. Justin Tucker is probably the greatest kicker ever. They're going to be all right with the rest of it. The question is, can we keep Lamar healthy? And what do the additions on offense, whether it's Flowers, whether it's OBJ, what do the additions on offense do to change how this passing game opens up? And what does that do in turn for the running game, which is what people have been terrified about forever? If you try to go out there and stop the run and they can throw on you, and you then try to stop the pass and they can run on you, this team is a nightmare. Absolute freaking nightmare, because nobody can do the things in the run game that Lamar Jackson can do. Justin can do some of the things, but he doesn't have that. He's really, really fast, and he's a much bigger build than Lamar is. But man, you've watched Lamar just bounce off of guys. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it. He runs unlike anyone else I've ever seen. But the Ravens are a terrifying team. The last thing, if they get to December and January healthy, which has not happened in a long time, I'll give you that. It's like saying if the Chargers stay healthy. I understand. I get it. It hasn't happened. So you think it can't happen. That's not the same thing. Just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't happen. But if they get to December and January with this roster looking the way that it does, with Lamar playing the way that he can, and the pass game starts to click, this is one of those teams that really, really can, even if they had to go on the road to Cincinnati, on the road to Buffalo, on the road to Kansas City, they can absolutely win those games. I have no doubt in my mind. It's not like a Cleveland. I'd need to see it. They need to have some things break their. No. If this pass game does what we think it can do this year and takes that step, this team is a nightmare. I don't know how you get them off the field. The last thing you want is the game swinging in the balance with Lamar Jackson having the ball in his hands and the best kicker ever ready to send you home. You don't want it. I'm telling you, Baltimore is a really, really, really scary team.
Yeah, they really are. And I think this offense is going to look a lot like the Kansas City Chiefs in terms of Mark Andrews is their Travis Kelce. He's a downgrade, but he's their wide receiver one. And then they're just going to play matchups. So there's going to be a week where it's Rashad Bateman. There's going to be a week where it's Zay Flowers. There's going to be a week where it's Odell Beckham. There might even be a Nelson Aguilar week in there because they find a matchup within there. And that is what is so exciting and so scary about the Baltimore Ravens, is that it's no longer Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown, or Mark Andrews and DeMarcus Robinson.
God, they gave no disrespect to my fine folks at Hobby Lobby, but my guy was dragging employees from the parking lot to the playoffs. Like, you have to understand, and I told Matt this the other time. This is a classic Stephen A. Smith quote. If you're replacing nothing, that makes you something. And you're now replacing guys who you forgot were NFL players with Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, who everyone seems to have forgotten about for some reason, and Nelson Aguilar, who, by the way, is not, you do not want him out there as your number 2 or number 3, but as your number 4, when you're replacing guys that nobody's ever even paid attention to. And now you have the depth there where functionally your 5th or 6th receiving option is Nelson Aguilar and your 7th might be J.K. Dobbins. There's a lot going on here, man. It's not necessarily that everybody is a wide receiver one and Odell's in his prime. And, you're talking about this absolute machine that's going to kill you with these 50-yard slant calls every week. It's going to be matchup based. There are going to be weeks that Lamar runs the ball 15 times. There are going to be weeks that he throws the ball 40 times. There may be weeks that he does both. God bless him. He is the fantasy player in this offense. He's the one, him and Mark Andrews, obviously. Those are the two that I want. The injury to Dobbins scares me a little bit, but again, volume, And when your quarterback takes so many of those rushes away from you, where he's being drafted is kind of the right range for me. And we talk about, looking forward in Dynasty. Zay Flowers is going to be a fun one. Man. That's he's got the juice. If you want electricity in a wide receiver, he's your guy. That loved that pick. Obviously, we loved it while we were in KC watching it. But if the Baltimore Ravens won the Super Bowl this year, there are people who would be surprised, and they shouldn't be, because this team has been right in the mix, if not leading the pack, towards the end of November every year, and then injuries catch up to them. We're hoping that doesn't happen this year. It's going to happen to somebody because it happens to somebody every year. They've just consistently gotten unlucky. The Chargers, same boat, consistently unlucky. If they could keep people off IR, and this team can absolutely win a Super Bowl, even if they have to go on the road, which not all of these teams that we discussed in that second tier could go on the road and win those games. This is a team that can, because if your linebackers can't keep up with Lamar, that's a problem. If your third corner can't keep up with a Zay Flowers or Odell Beckham Jr., that's a problem. If you don't have a safety or a backer that can carry Mark Andrews, that's a problem. And Monken's just going to lean into whichever those matchups are the biggest nightmare for you, and he did it at Georgia. You watch Stetson Bennett just basically play point guard. That's all they're going to ask Lamar to do, and occasionally he's just going to take it himself. It's going to be a really fun offense to watch. I hope everyone stays healthy. I hope we get more of those games like we got early last year. My favorite game that I watched last year, maybe period, was Miami-Baltimore early in the season. It might have even been week 1 or 2. That was as much fun as I had watching a game all year. That was awesome. Ball flying all over the place. Two really good defensive coordinators, two really good defensive coaches, sitting there going, what the fuck do we do?
There's no answer.
No, seriously, if you're trying to play defense against a fully hot Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, and then the other side, you're trying to cover Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, it turns into a track meet. It was awesome. That was so much fun. I hope we get more games like that this year in the AFC, and I suspect that we will, because teams are just realizing at this point, defense year over year is not as stable as offense is. So it makes a lot of sense for us to invest in this side of the ball and let someone scheme the other side, kind of like the Bengals have done with Lou Anarumo, and mixed and match certain pieces that they think are replaceable in that defense. Baltimore is a team that I think having a futures ticket on makes a lot of sense. But again, win total 10.5. Why do we not like that? Because of the injury risk involved in the division and the conference they play in. This line is right. And if the line is right, and you're just basically one side or the other betting what you feel. But if you feel strongly that they're going to get to 11 wins, it probably makes sense to instead just bet them outright to make the playoffs, bet them outright to win the AFC. The number for a Super Bowl is 20-1. If we, again, same thing as last time. If we run the simulation 20 times this NFL season, you don't think Baltimore wins 1? I think it's unlikely that we simulate the 23 season 20 times and Baltimore doesn't come away with at least 1.
And I think that's my favorite bet of these, because a smart man told me to look at the discrepancy between the MVP odds and the Super Bowl odds. That smart man was you yesterday on Player Profiler today. But Lamar Jackson, his MVP odds, he's number 6, plus 1,500 is the best you can get. It's plus 1,200 to plus 1,500. Whereas the Super Bowl odds, they are number 8 in Super Bowl odds, plus 1,800 to plus 2,000. That feels like some value to me.
Yeah, the thing is, Lamar could absolutely win MVP without Baltimore progressing far in the postseason, but the two typically go hand in hand. Just because we haven't seen an MVP in a Super Bowl other than Mahomes since Warner in '99. That was the last time that happened. How crazy is that? Brady never did it. Brady never did it. Manning never did it.
If he beat the Giants, he would have, but
yeah. Brady never did it. Manning never did it. Rodgers never did it. Ben never did it. Like, you're talking about a lot of guys that have been right there at the edge forever and never got it done. But I think 20-1 is way, 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 way too much. I would that number to me probably should be closer to 13, 14-1, somewhere in there. And I think that by mid-season, if we just come back and revisit these, I think by mid-season you're probably going to see that. So that's one of my favorites that we've given out on this show so far is Ravens 20-1 to win the Super Bowl, because much like the Chargers, they don't need things to break their way. They just need the health and to be able to get out of the regular season unscathed to be able to go make that run.
I love the Baltimore Ravens this year. And for that same reason, it's why I don't like any of these Bengals bets, because they're all correct, right? Joe Burrow at second in MVP odds. That's correct. Even with the calf injury, because we got a little bit scared yesterday. The books panicked, took all the odds down. You couldn't bet any. They come back up. Joe Burrow still second in MVP odds. Bengals still fifth in Super Bowl odds. I think they took a slight step back because I think they were ahead of the Bills before, were they not?
They floated between the two. The Buffalo and Cincinnati have been floating back and forth as that number 2 team behind Kansas City in the AFC particularly, but also just in terms of Super Bowl odds. So the Bengals lines are all right. 11-1 to win the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's about right. AFC Championship, they're plus 550, which again, about right. There's not a lot of value here. If you're that happens to teams when they have their supernova explosion year 2 years in a row. They're a known quantity.
Lamar Jackson hopefully not missing any time this year. They improved the offensive line. Jamar Chase. The mute button went off for some reason. Anyways, Lamar Jackson. No, goodness gracious. Joe Burrow. Improved offensive line. Jamar Chase. Hopefully not missing time with a broken hip. Improved defense. This is just a better team than they've been.
This is the team that I think this year is most positioned to win a Super Bowl. That doesn't mean the betting market odds give you the number that you would want here. 9-1 to 11-1. They're very, very dependent on one guy, as everybody in the AFC has to be, because the quality of talent around them is so much different than the NFC. The Niners were able to run through the NFC with whoever they wanted at quarterback. They did it with Garoppolo. I think they could have done it with Lance. They did it with Purdy. They could have done it with Josh Johnson for all I care. There's just such a difference between their roster quality, the Eagles roster quality, the Cowboys roster quality, and then basically everyone else. Whereas in the AFC, you get to like the 8th, 9th, 10th team, and you're like, whoa, they still got dudes everywhere, right? The AFC is a gauntlet, and it's becoming increasingly likely that your Super Bowl champion will come out of the AFC if they didn't get too dinged up in the process of going through everybody to get to the mountaintop. The most interesting thing about the Bengals to me is they solved the problem that they didn't even know was a problem. And that problem was wide receiver depth going forward, because they did miss Chase and they did miss Higgins for periods of time last year. And
remember the Trenton Irwin game?
Trenton Irwin and Trent Taylor. Yeah. And so what they did was they went into the draft, took Andre Yosavash, who we love, and then Charlie Football out of Purdue. And they don't need to be ready this year. They don't need to be ready tomorrow. But there will come a time where Tyler Boyd is no longer there, and one of them is going to be able to fill that spot. They're not going to have to give up more draft capital. They're not going to have to trade for somebody. They're just getting them ready. And it's just going to be rinse and repeat with the same group of people. They brought Mixon back for one more year. Irv Smith is there at tight end now. Forgot about him. It's an interesting roster build. Mainly because there's not really a weakness anywhere. And that's very rare to say about an NFL roster. I mean, maybe your argument would be backup quarterback. That's about it. Like the running back room, solid. The receiver room, potentially the best in the league. The offensive line is at worst among the top 10, probably pushing the top 5. You're talking about a defense that, when it matters, has been among the best in the league now for multiple years. It's not just, it's not a 2-game sample size here. This has all the makeup of a championship team. They're being priced correctly. Burrow's MVP odds are priced correctly. Their odds to win the AFC are priced correctly. Their Super Bowl odds are priced correctly. The over-under win total, some places are 10.5, and you have to pay juice for the over. Some places are at 11.5, and you can get a little bit back on the over on plus odds. This is an 11-win team all day, every day, twice on Sunday. They're your classic 11-6 team that is absolutely terrifying to a Buffalo or a Kansas City, who, despite having a super freak alien at quarterback, they just haven't had defenses like Lou's given Joe and has given Zach Taylor. One of the more startling stats I've ever seen is in the 4 fourth quarters between every Kansas City Cincinnati game that's been played in the Mahomes and Burrow era. If you can even add overtime in the 22 AFC Championship game. In those 4 fourth quarters, Lou Anarumo's defense has held Kansas City to 9 total points. 9. They have not scored a fourth quarter touchdown in any of those games. 0. That is one of the most remarkable things you will ever see done to a team that's that good. And it does show you something. They're not afraid. The Bengals are not afraid of Kansas City. There are a lot of teams that lose before they ever step out there. They're not one of them. And the thing is, if they can stay healthy enough this year, obviously we're going to monitor Burrow's calf injury. I highly doubt we see him even take a snap during the preseason.
No, that would be irresponsible.
Yeah, I don't even. Does he really need to take snaps in the preseason? No, like waste of our time here. But this is the team that I think, out of everybody this year, and I thought it 2 years ago, and I thought it last year also, but this is the team that, if someone other than Kansas City is going to come out of the AFC, I think this is the most likely team to do it. Buffalo is starting to feel the wear and tear of Allen's contract doing what it does to rosters on the defensive side, and they've needed a second to kind of gather themselves and reorganize the roster the way that they want it. That's still a really, really good football team that's capable of beating anyone any week. It's just their method for beating these playoff teams is Josh Allen going superhuman. And yes, he's capable of doing that, but that's a tall order against a roster as good as Cincinnati, a roster as good as Kansas City, a roster as good as the Chargers, the Jags, the Ravens, right? You're just asking him to carry so much of the load. And Cincinnati's made Joe's life so much easier than Buffalo's made Josh's. And I think the coolest part about the way that they've done that is, yes, Burrow can still take games over when he has to, but he doesn't always have to. In the way that Mahomes typically does, and the way that Allen typically does, he doesn't have to do that. He can lean on a defense. He can lean on a run game. This is the team, I think, that is probably, I think they do it again. This is the year I think Cincinnati wins the Super Bowl. I thought it was going to be last year towards the end of the year. We thought it was going to be Eagles, Bengals. It ended up not working out that way. But realistically, looking around, the Ravens are a serious threat. The Browns can be, if Watson gets back to being Deshaun Watson, can be a serious threat. The Steelers are going to scare some people. Top to bottom, I don't know that there's a better roster in the AFC than Cincinnati's. Burrow's health, paramount importance. There is probably, I don't think there's a shot in hell they could do it without him. But if he's there, and he's going to, calf injuries are weird. He's going to feel the effects of it for a while. If he can get back to 100% before week 1, or even by week 5, 6, 7, this team is the team that actually can go into Arrowhead and win, because we've seen them do it before. And we've seen them do it in that game before. And we've seen them do it in the regular season before. So that's the game of the year circled on everyone's calendar. It's Kansas City, Cincinnati every year, because it feels like a de facto AFC Championship game preview. Obviously, we circle Kansas City, Buffalo. We circle Cincinnati, Kansas City, or Cincinnati, Buffalo also. But there's a reason we circled the games between those three teams, is because those games usually lead to determining who has home field, and then ultimately who gets the right to go to Arrowhead at the end of the AFC. And I think it's going to be Cincinnati, and I think this is the year that they get over and actually win the whole thing, that is provided Joe stays healthy.
I am with you here. I have said since Joe Burrow was drafted that he would be MVP by 2023 at the latest. This is the last year for him to prove me right. But at the same time, people that disagreed with me when I made that statement have come back and said, I don't even care if he wins MVP. You were right. He's that dude. He is him. So I will be rooting for the Bengals. I won't be betting on them anywhere, because these are all bad bets.
No, you wait until this is a great example. You like a team and they start off slow. Like, I think the Bengals started 1-3 last year.
Yeah. Something
like that, 1-2. They were struggling early. At that point, that's when I would have bet them, because that number would have come down significantly. And at that point, the number is worth it. These numbers here that you're looking at right now are just too correct, so to speak, to really find any kind of advantage on. If you're a Bengals fan listening to this, you can obviously bet on your team, dude. We all do it. Everybody does it. That's fine. We're talking here more so about, long-term strategies to potentially win you a couple bucks to throw on, custom jerseys. Eagles, Kelly Green's coming Monday. Excited about that. But we try to break down market insights in a way that makes sense. Whereas, quarterbacks MVP odds versus team Super Bowl odds is a good one, versus teams to win the AFC is a good one, because they are heavily correlated between who gets really to that Final Four and who wins MVP. So I think Burrow's in for a huge year. A 5,000-yard season would not surprise me. I know Larky has gone on, and I think Matt also, with Jamar as wide receiver 1 overall this year.
Yep.
I don't disagree. I think he's going to get a remarkably large target share between him and Higgins. But again, you forget Tyler Boyd is pretty easily the best number 3 in the league right now. I mean, obviously you could say, Jackson up in Seattle, but we'll see how long it takes for, him to pass one of DK or Lockett, whether that's this year, next year, whenever that happens. But until then, until he actually goes out there and does it, Tyler's probably the best number 3 in the league right now. And so if you can argue that they've got the best number 1 in the league, there is an also argument to be made that T is the best number 2 in the league. And it's pretty clear that as of this moment, they have the best number 3 in the league. There's a lot to like about what Joe has to throw to. And then they added the depth in case someone gets hurt, because inevitably someone's going to miss time. It's just how the NFL works. It's absolutely grueling. And when you talk to ex-players or current players about what they put their bodies through to be able to play on Sundays, you gain a different kind of appreciation for, the basically modern gladiators that they are. This is my favorite this year to actually win the Super Bowl. Ignore the odds. I think this is the team that found something at the end of last year that they can lean heavily into this year. And they've already beaten the 2 teams that in theory would be in front of them at their places in back-to-back years to go to the Super Bowl and then to go to an AFC Championship game. So we know they can do it. They have done it. They were an Aaron Donald miracle away from potentially winning the Super Bowl 2 years ago. There is no Super Bowl hangover with this team. Everybody was super worried about it. Is it a flash in the pan? Are they going to be able to do it again? No. They're right there. They're right there among the 4 best teams in the league, and I think they will be until, someone comes picking Lou Anarumo and Brian Callahan out of there.
And even then, Joe Burrow's still there.
And
Jamar
even then,
Chase is still there.
Jamar T. There's not really a weak spot on this roster where you sit there and go, oh, that's where they're vulnerable. And it's a really remarkable job done by Duke Tobin, Katie Blackburn, that whole staff in Cincinnati. They are one of my favorite teams, obviously, to cheer for, period, but also just one of my favorite teams to watch just because of the multitude of ways that they win games against good teams. It's not like they just beat up on bad teams multiple ways. They found ways to beat really, really good teams, whether it's, 4th and 6, throwing the 30-yard bombs to Jamar in Kansas City. Who else has the stones to try that? It's pretty special roster that they've got going on there. And I hope they get it done this year because, man, those fans have waited a long, long time for a team to really break through and do what I think the Bengals are capable of this year. But you know me, it's hard for me to be super objective about a team that I like that much.
Yeah, it's hard for you to be unbiased when it comes to a team in Ohio as well. Final thing I do want to ask you about is the running back position, because Joe Mixon took a pay cut. Aaron Jones took a pay cut. Saquon signed and got a pay bump, but it's a pay cut from what he was asking for. Dalvin Cook is set to sign by the end of the weekend. So really, we're down to 3. Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, they're all holding out in different ways. Jacobs is not signing his franchise tag. Taylor and Dobbins are doing the PUP, oh, I'm injured thing. But then we've got Fournette, Zeke, and Kareem Hunt lurking out there. So do they have any leverage, or is this just a situation where Josh Jacobs, you got to show up, you got to play. Jonathan Taylor, you got to show up, you got to play. J.K. Dobbins, you got to show up, you got to play. Otherwise, we're going to hold that missed time against you next year when it comes to contract negotiation, and you've sewered yourself.
I think Jonathan Taylor has the most leverage of the 3. You're breaking in a rookie quarterback. We know how good Jonathan Taylor is when he's out there. I think that one's pretty easy across the board, other than Jim Irsay doing Jim Irsay things, which obviously is pissing off a lot of Colts fans.
And they have.
And I don't blame you guys, by the way. I don't blame you guys for that. I know how he operates, and I understand that he is a personality like that. Dobbins is an interesting case because of the amount of time he's missed with injury. Obviously, he wants some guarantees. Obviously, he wants to make some money. That's my Buckeye boy. I love him. But looking at it purely contract-based, he's just got to show up and prove that he can handle what they're asking him to handle again, much like Lamar did last year. And then he got hurt. But because he's a quarterback, they're still going to get the payday. There's just baked-in risk reward there. And I think Jacobs obviously is just disgruntled with the situation in Vegas because, as you should be, the team doesn't seem to have a ton of direction as to what they want to do. They're not horrible. It's not like we're looking at the Cardinals roster. They have pieces. There's a lot to like about that roster. It's just, can you compete with Kansas City? Can you compete with the Chargers? You look outside your division, can you really chase those teams down? I don't think so. Not with Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback. So he's basically sitting there thinking, I'm making $10 million and that's great. But if I get injured and I can't play again, that's it. That's all I'm ever going to make. So he's probably going to have a much more difficult time than Jonathan Taylor in terms of securing that deal, I think. But Taylor is probably going to get his money one way or the other. Irsay is not notoriously cheap. I don't think the Davises are either. Dobbins is in a weird spot just because he's hurt too often. Saquon and Dalvin obviously basically have sorted their situations out. Fournette's an interesting one because he's basically a goal line hammer at this point.
And a satellite back too, weirdly enough. He's a short yardage and satellite back. You don't want him getting between the 20s carries, though. It's
Fournette.
weird.
Fournette would be my choice over Zeke, who I just think is basically truly just a goal line hammer at this point. Kareem Hunt's an interesting one because there's still juice there. People forget he hasn't really had a full running back workload in a long time. He's not washed. Like, there's still juice there. It's just a matter of who is going to use him and utilize him properly in order to get what you can out of the rest of his career. So I think he's probably the most likely candidate to go to somewhere where he can get 30% of the touches. Fournette, to me, is probably going to sign with whoever pays him the most. Same with Zeke. But again, if Jacobs, Taylor, Dobbins, if they hold out into the season, which I don't think they will, but they could, they absolutely could. Those three become a lot more enticing as, you know, your RB1 is sitting outside the stadium eating popcorn, holding signs that say, "Pay me, you dicks."
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.